You are climbing right up me. I know. Okay, yes. No, I love you. I do love you. I do. I do. But you're heavy. And you're clearly way too happy to be here. All right, do you want to turn around and say hello? Come on, turn around and say hello. I love you. They need to see you too. Say hello to everybody out there. Yeah. Tell them, say, this is what a needy cat looks like. I have offended him. In fact, Audie has been really, really needy lately. I think it's because winter is finally really settling in. Okay, welcome back to Just Chattin'. And this is the series of videos we do on Thursday and Sunday evenings just for our own entertainment. So, in response to your replies in the comments last week, I went ahead and did a segment specifically detailing Christopher Bouzy's legal troubles. Now, because this is very complicated, I did it in the form of a slideshow, so we would have pictures. And frankly, it's because without pictures, we're all going to get hopelessly lost because there's just so much going on here. And I also did my best to throw a little humor in because there are some pretty awful things. A landlord being defrauded of more than $10,000, money I'm sure she's never going to see again. A man who, for no reason I can discern, is being accused of committing a horrible sex crime. Oh, and as if sex crime alone isn't enough, there are elements that constitute hate crime sort of layered into it just because that strawberry shortcake isn't high enough all by itself. Frankly, I find it amazing Bouzy is still loose on the streets. So, when we come back, we're going to get straight into it, and then when our slideshow is done, we're going to talk a little bit about what the takeaways are. Christopher Bouzy's current legal woes date back to the spring of 2019, and they consist of 4 separate cases. Now, some of these are somewhat interconnected, but I do think we can tease that apart and take them in something resembling chronological order for the sake of clarity. So, let's start with what was going on in the spring of 2019. Christopher Bouzy rented an apartment from a woman named Nicole Semelli. Now, this is clearly not Nicole Semelli. This is simply an image I have brought into this in order to give you some kind of face to associate with the name. It might help keep the players straight. Now, for all I know, Ms. Semelli is a 23-year-old grad student working her way through Johns Hopkins as a Victoria's Secret model. So, do not infer that this is anything resembling a legitimate likeness of the woman. Ms. Semelli, by the way, is the real victim in everything that's going on here, as you will see. She rents an apartment to Christopher Bouzy and a female co-tenant. Now, I have a name for that woman, but she's a bit player, and I have no idea if she has any legitimate involvement in what Bouzy is up to. For all I know, she could be a victim too. So, she is going to be played by this beautiful and talented woman, Anna May Wong, one of the early Chinese American film stars from the 1930s. All right, so Bouzy and the woman rent the apartment. They sign a lease. They do this in mid-April. They pay a portion of April's rent. Then May rolls around. They pay a portion of May's rent, but not the entire amount. June rolls around. There is no money forthcoming. So Ms. Semelli goes to the renters court in her area. This is in New Jersey, by the way. And she begins eviction proceedings. The hearing is scheduled for June 19th. Well, on June 18th, one day before the hearing, the woman files for bankruptcy. Now, that has the effect of stopping the eviction because the bankruptcy means that the court will be getting involved in her debts. And therefore, any debt collection, which would include what's going on in renters court, would be stopped. Now, Ms. Semelli sees an attorney. The attorney tells her that as a landlord, and they are still in that apartment, she can ask to have the rent removed from the bankruptcy hearing. So she does this. It works. The eviction eventually gets back on track. However, a couple of months roll around, and as the eviction hearing is approaching, Bouzy files for bankruptcy, derailing the process yet again. Now, both of these bankruptcy filings were 11th hour. It's like just before the eviction hearing. And this is, by the way, a very old dodge. People have been using this filing for bankruptcy in order to forestall eviction or avoid paying rent for a long time. And in fact, it often works. So, eventually, because time passes and Ms. Semelli is racking up more and more legal fees, eventually she does manage to evict them. This is in November. So, by November 2019, Bouzy and the woman have had occupancy of this apartment, and the apartment, by the way, rented for $2,700 a month. So it was definitely a high-end apartment. They've had occupancy of this without paying even one full month's rent for something like 6 or 7 months. Ms. Semelli did manage to get them out, which is good news. So, at some point, now we're going to cast ahead a little because I want to try to keep these cases together. At some point, Ms. Semelli goes to court and gets a judgment against Christopher Bouzy for $10,000, which is certainly not going to make her whole because she's out a lot more than that. But apparently, this was acceptable to her, and I assume it was small claims court where she did not have to pay more legal fees. She's probably content with the judgment, though heaven only knows if she's ever going to see a penny of it. Why did she not go against the woman? Because the woman actually followed through on the bankruptcy. She filed and then declared bankruptcy. Bouzy did not. He merely filed for bankruptcy and then never showed up for any of the proceedings, so the petition was dropped by the court. Now, what this means is the people who say Christopher Bouzy a bankrupt are probably not being accurate. Just throwing that out there. So, we roll into 2020, and Bouzy, very much like all the rest of us, is keeping a low profile because, let's face it, we're spending time in lockdown, etc. However, by the end of 2020, something interesting is happening. This man, Jason Goodman, who is referred to as a conspiracy theorist, is investigating a conspiracy theory, which is what people like this do. He's looking into a suspicious suicide. And at some point here, which would be probably late 2020, early 2021, he gets into a Twitter discussion with one of the people he is investigating for this suspicious suicide. We are going to call him Mr. X because, frankly, he is extraneous to the issue. So, Jason Goodman and Mr. X are involved in a Twitter chat back and forth. Now, Christopher Bouzy, apparently with nothing better to do, inserts himself into the middle of this Twitter chat. And Jason Goodman, remember, this guy is investigating conspiracy theories. And although, to be perfectly honest with you, I'm pretty sure there's a tinfoil hat in the back of his closet somewhere. Just because you're a conspiracy theorist doesn't mean you're an idiot. In fact, most of these people are very good investigators. It doesn't take him any time at all to come up with Christopher Bouzy's phone number, so he calls Bouzy. And they chat on the phone for about an hour. So, the discussion with Mr. X is what puts Goodman on Bouzy's radar, but the phone call is very likely what has really put him on Bouzy's hit list. Bouzy responds, as he always does, by defaming Goodman. He starts repeating stories that Goodman believe originate with Mr. X. And the stories are that Goodman had sexually assaulted Halima Aden, a supermodel who is known for wearing Islamic dress and hijab when she poses. Further, and because this is important, even though Goodman doesn't really push this side of it, but as a woman, I feel this is important. They're asserting that this alleged sexual assault took place when Halima was underage, and Goodman is Jewish. Halima is Muslim. So there are levels of hate crime creeping around in this, as well as this horrific allegation of sexual assault. So Jason Goodman has been defamed. Now, he sends a cease and desist letter to Bouzy, telling him if he continues, he's going to take him to court. So, life goes on for both of them. Goodman, he has this deep state conspiracy to investigate, so he has bigger fish to fry. And he just doesn't pay much attention to Bouzy after that. Bouzy, of course, has his own entertainment. Everything moves along quietly. Goodman doesn't hear from Bouzy until the 11th hour once again, when his window for bringing a defamation suit is about to close. And just as Bouzy has done with Ms. Semelli and both of those bankruptcy filings, he ends up repeating these rape allegations at the 11th hour. Now, once again, conspiracy theorist does not necessarily equal stupid. And keep in mind, people who are investigating deep state conspiracies, after a while, they get to be pretty good investigators. So Goodman manages to file his lawsuit in the nick of time because the filing procedures have changed during lockdown and you can do it electronically. So he gets his lawsuit in right under the wire. And then we have a new character in the mix. And the new character is Jason Goodman's process server. And in this drama, he is going to be played by this man, and you may recognize him as the International Express delivery guy from Good Omens. And you'll see why I chose this particular guy to play the part in a moment. So, our process server shows up at Bouzy's home to deliver the notice that he is about to be sued. Bouzy won't leave his house. He won't open his door. He is simply hiding from the process server. Now, the process server is a professional. He goes out to his car, he documents the whole thing. And while he is writing up all his notes, Bouzy is in his window, peeking out at him like a complete Karen, and he's taking pictures. And he calls the police. Now, he knows this guy is a process server. He knows the guy has a legitimate reason for being in his neighborhood, but he calls the police anyway, and he posts this on his Twitter account. I don't even know what to say about a guy being that dumb, but yeah, Bouzy is that dumb. He posts this all on his Twitter account. Well, our process server comes back a couple of days later and a couple of days after that because they have some specific requirements about the dates and times when you serve someone. And in the end, they get permission from the court to do what's called a nail and mail. That's when they post the papers on your door and send you a copy by certified mail. They don't literally nail it on your door, but they just, post it there. So, Bouzy has been served. Now, keep in mind, all of this nonsense of calling the police, refusing to answer the door, the process server knowing that Bouzy is in the house, he has made notes of all of this, and it's all been forwarded to the court.
Ours is not to reason why. Ours is to deliver packages.
Next thing that happens is Goodman is contacted by a man who is claiming to be Bouzy's attorney. This may, in fact, be the same attorney who sent me that cease and desist letter. And you know the one because I showed it to you. I blew my nose on it. I threw it away. But I did say it read as if an 8-year-old had written it. Well, from what Goodman has related about his conversation with the lawyer, I think this is the same guy. And in fact, Goodman was helping this guy by telling him what he ought to do next because of the lawsuit. Turns out the guy did nothing. Bouzy did nothing. Bouzy has been served. He clearly has legal counsel. No one has responded to the courts. And the clock is ticking and ticking. And all these papers are sitting on a magistrate's desk. And eventually somebody looks at this and says, okay, we are going to decide the case in Goodman's favor by default. He will get a default judgment. What that means is that by not participating in the process at all, Bouzy has in effect forfeited his case. He's just said, do what you want to do. I don't care because, he's hiding in his home. Now, what is happening now is as we speak, like this week, it is very likely that they are going to formalize that judgment. The court has already decided they are going to decide the case in Goodman's favor, and it's just a formality now, and that should be happening this week. So that is case number 2. Remember, Ms. Semelli got $10,000 in a judgment. Now, she hasn't gotten the money, but she has the right to go after Bouzy for the money. Goodman, who was hideously defamed, I mean, what was said about him was utterly outrageous. Goodman is likely to get a much more significant judgment. But who knows what that will be? A court will decide that. And then whether or not he is able to collect, well, it's the same thing with poor Ms. Semelli. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. Personally, I find it unlikely because I don't think Bouzy has $2,000 worth of anything to attach. Never mind $10,000 from Ms. Semelli and Goodman's judgment, which may run into the hundreds of thousands, despite the fact that he is claiming Bot Sentinel is worth like $5 million. I just don't believe that. So, while the suit with Goodman and Bouzy is sort of sitting on the magistrate's desk, waiting for Bouzy to decide whether or not he is going to respond, something else happens. Amber Heard and Johnny Depp have their famous trial where Johnny is suing Amber for defamation, and it is being reported on by a number of YouTube channels, including That Umbrella Guy. And this is driving Bouzy crazy. His usual take on this, as we all know in the Megxit community, is a complaint that people are making YouTube videos profiting from hate. So, of course, he was accusing the Umbrella Guy of making $1 million a year reporting on the trial. Well, the Umbrella Guy has connections within the YouTube community of lawyers, and there's a law group, and they're all chummy and they're all supporting one another. By that I mean emotionally, I don't mean financially. Although they might be, I don't know. So Bouzy goes gunning for the Umbrella Guy, and that pulls this group of YouTube lawyers into the fight in defense of the Umbrella Guy. And Bouzy, for some reason, decided to specifically target Nate the lawyer. I am not sure why. It must be clear, even to an idiot like Bouzy, that Nate is much brighter than he is. This is not even bringing a knife to a gunfight. This is like bringing a squirt gun to a gunfight. It's just crazy that he would want to take on all of these people. But, yeah, Bouzy's nothing if not crazy. So he ends up saying that Nate the lawyer is not a lawyer, that he was a corrupt cop when he was a police officer, a corrupt district attorney when he was a district attorney. And seriously, an ex-cop, an ex-district attorney. Bouzy has a real knack for picking his enemies, doesn't he? He's certainly given Nate more than enough ammunition to go after him for defamation. And Nate has. Now we're going to have to go back to our first case, Bouzy and Semelli and the rent and the bankruptcy. Now, as I mentioned, the woman went through with the bankruptcy filing. Bouzy did not, but his filing is still available. The statement he made to the court in preparation for his bankruptcy, which he didn't want, never happened. Still, the information you give the court has to be accurate. You have to be honest. You can't lie, because these are documents going into a court. And I believe it does say right on the bottom that it's all true under penalty of perjury. And you can understand why, in a bankruptcy case, they need the truth, because people are naturally going to try to hide assets if they can. Well, Bouzy made a number of false statements, including claiming very specifically that he had no business, didn't own a business, had no interest in any business, whereas clearly, and this is documented by the paperwork, he bought Sentinel. So, please understand, when you are filling out these forms, the court will ask you the same question 3 or 4 different ways because they want accurate information. So there is no question that Bouzy was making false statements. Now, Nate, remember, former cop, former DA, knew exactly who to report this misrepresentation of information to, and he did so. So that now is case 3, because this was something he did before he even filed his lawsuit. So that's number 3. Bouzy is going to be investigated for making false statements in that bankruptcy filing. And now, finally, number 4, which is the real capper here, is Nate, the lawyer, is suing him for defamation. And it looks like the case is moving forward. Now, these things take time, but it's moving forward. Now, here is the real icing on the cake. This is the thing that should make all of us sit up and take notice. Guess who is defending Bouzy against Nate, the lawyer's lawsuit for defamation? Ballard Spahr. And this is Amber Heard's law firm. Ballard Spahr is a far cry from that lawyer, the one I said was probably an 8th grader, who wrote me the cease and desist letter and sat on the phone with Jason Goodman while Jason advised him on how to proceed with the case. So, what do we make of that? First of all, I'm going to say I have no idea how Christopher Bouzy could possibly afford a law firm like that. This is a guy who couldn't even pay his rent. It's certainly something to think about. So, what'd you think of that? Hard for me to believe that one guy can get into that much trouble all by himself. And he seems to be reveling in it. This is someone who is just thrilled by the amount of chaos he is generating. I guess he's one of those people who believes that there's no such thing as bad publicity. Well, as I said in our little slideshow, isn't it very, very interesting that out of nowhere, Bouzy, who apparently couldn't even scrape together a legal team to deal with a very small defamation case, has somehow managed to come up with legal representation from one of the hotshot New York law firms. And this is the same firm that represented Amber Heard in the case defending against Johnny Depp's defamation allegations. So we already know they don't have a very good track record in this field. But how in the world could he afford them? Oh my. I know he did a fundraiser, and I understand he raised about $75. These are not attorneys whose time can be purchased for $75. It's very interesting. Nate, the lawyer, has speculated, and this is all speculation. Nate is not making allegations. Speculation. That it may well be that in discovery, when Nate's attorneys bring this defamation case to the point of discovery, when they get to go through other people's records, that they may come across a lot of information, particularly involving Bouzy and his connection to Amber Heard. Because remember, he was paid, and he admits it, to investigate Amber Heard being trolled with misinformation and all. And in fact, at one time on his webpage, he did state he was paid by Meghan Markle for services. And we know. Now, the YouTube lawyers do not know this, but those of us in the Megxit community, we know that the Sussex Squad gets money from Montecito, and we know they in turn provide money to Bouzy because so many of you have seized images of their Twitter posts to the same effect. So, yeah, really, really sketchy what's going on here. But it should be wonderful to watch it play out. Now, what I hope this video has done for you is when you go over to the LawTube videos about what's going on with Nate the lawyer's case or any of the other legal wranglings around Christopher Bouzy, that you will at least know who all the players are and have a general sense of what these cases are about. So, we have the case of skipping out on the rent. We have number two, what was that? Number two was when he made false statements on a bankruptcy filing. We have the horrible defamation of Jason Goodman, and we have the equally horrible defamation of Nate the lawyer. And further, I will say, Bouzy is just pushing my buttons real hard here, because now what he is doing is making fun of Nate because of his visual impairment. So, I guess Bouzy didn't get the memo. You don't get to heaven by making fun of the blind. So, we'll have to see how this plays out. I will keep you posted, but I wanted to make sure you had a good overview and understand what is happening with Bouzy and his cases. All right, we are going to take a look at a slideshow on the way out. I think we will do little Evelyn, because after all that mess, I think we need a cute baby to look at. All right, I will see you all next time. Meanwhile, have a terrific day.